you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, the Our Lady Sings of That Makes It Official. Welcome to 16 years and one of the oldest podcasts still alive and daily broadcasting. Also, nearly 3,000 episodes you can go through of all the most amazing things. So be sure to refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodness..About, youtube.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places on the internet. Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind. Today's featured author is brought to you by Majestic Authors Media, specializing in strategic marketing and publishing to help authors reach their ideal audience and maximize their book success, turning powerful messages into global impact, one story at a time. Today we have an amazing young man on the show with us today. He's the author of 8 different books, and we're going to lead off with the first one here called The Lev Effect. Let me spell that for you. L-E-V, for if you're searching that on Amazon. The Lev Effect. Out November 2nd, 2020 by Sheldon Greene. We're going to end it with him, find out more of his deets, as the kids say. I don't know if that's what the kids say, but I just make it up. And maybe they'll start doing it because I'm saying it. Sheldon Greene has worked simultaneously as a lawyer, an executive, and novelist with an early stint as a bureaucrat. His diverse career began with his appointment as a warden of insurance in the state of Ohio at age 23. In that position, he initiated possibly the first challenge to America's insufficient healthcare delivery system and its cost implications. As general counselor to California Rural Legal Assistance, he filed a suit which blocked Governor Reagan's evisceration of health assistance for the working poor, and that same year brought a suit against the U.S. Department of Labor, which terminated the federal government's program to bring temporary farm workers from Mexico. He drafted and got bipartisan support for the passage of the first law penalizing the knowing hiring of illegal entrants, and he was one of the founders of the new Israeli Fund, or Israel Fund, I should say. Anyway, whatever. As investment, I think that's the same, actually. An investment in wind turbine turned into a 25-year ongoing alternative career as an executive in wind energy development company and a role in the largest wind energy projects in the history of the industry. He's published 8 novels with excellent critical reviews, as well as articles dealing with public policy. He's an online magazine on Substack called Crit, and he served on the boards of Great Lakes Energy Institute and Case Western Reserve. Welcome to the show. How are you, Shell?
I'm fine, and thanks very much for that introduction.
Thank you. I didn't write it. Somebody else did.
Yeah, I guess you're looking at them.
People want me to follow them around and introduce them wherever I find them on the world. I'm like, yeah, let's get you introduced there, eh? So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your book here, and what is it about?
Yeah, the Lev Effect is actually the sequel to the first novel that I wrote that was published by Random House, and it had critical acclaim all over the place. And the common narrator is the narrator in the Lost and Found as well. And so the book is as I said, it's a sequel. And in this situation, it's the people in the town, which is a small town in Pennsylvania, decide that they want to convert a disused home for the aged to a school for kids, and particularly Jewish kids. So that's really how the thing starts. And let me just read you the first couple of paragraphs, which sets it thematically, and then I'll go on and give you the summary of the book. It's as follows. Noodleman started it. I want Isaac to have a real education, he said, looking around the synagogue board with his wise hound's eyes. Those were the words that began it all. Just 8 words, a few sounds tossed into the air of the boardroom. But words have power. They can make people kill, make them fall in love, even buy appliances they don't need. So in any event, that is the thematic start of the book. And they go forward and they have trouble finding somebody, and they finally find a guy who is a refusenik, which, as you might know, during the time of the Soviet Union, were the Jews that were leaving because they were subject to a lot of persecution. And so this guy represents that he was a superintendent, and he has excellent scholastic record as a Jewish scholar, which is one of the reasons why he's persecuted actually there and wants to leave. So he is hired, and he makes significant changes after they get people enrolled there. For one thing, the older people are disused. As we know in our society, once you're on the shelf after 40 or 50, you're obsolete. So he engages them in the process. And he also moves to beyond the comfort level of the community. For example, he enrolls a Palestinian kid. He celebrates Palestinian National Day. He has an event for the Catholic Charities. And he celebrates the homeless who've been hanging around this area and have been obviously disrespected. One occasion, he has an event, a dinner, in which the homeless that are hanging around there are celebrated as the honored guests and have the fancy meal. And the other people who have been invited are eating kind of a thin gruel. So this causes a lot of discomfort in the town and in the community, but he carries on with it. And so let me just read a couple of other paragraphs, if it's okay, that kind of gives you a sense of who he is.
Sure.
The first one, perhaps. Life. He's dealing with life here. Life is an endless paper chain of compromises, you could say. As children, we equate our aspirations with what is fair. But life is not always fair, any more than we, you and me, always do the right thing, making the right choice when we have a choice, and meeting the expectations of people who depend on us. Life comes at you like a drunk driver, nothing you planned, and if you had thought it was going to happen, you would have gotten out of the way. So there's one other section I think that I'll read, that this one that tells you something about who he is. One of the things is that the older people are really thrilled to be engaged. They have function in this organization. But there is a lot of controversy. And I should first say that what the book is doing thematically at a tertiary level is it's a retelling of the Passion story. And that's very important because there is ambiguity all through the book, and people make various interpretations of what's going on based upon their beliefs. So I would say that one of the things that is communicated here is that you really read this and you make your own determinations on whether or not he is, as they ultimately, some people concluded, a return of the Messiah. And one of the reasons why that happens is that all the things that he's doing parallel the life of Jesus when he was on earth. And so some people, when it goes viral, with some of the things that he does in the media, that becomes the American celebrity characteristic, and it opens the door to people making various determinations about who he is. And the determinations are really based upon perspective. That's one of the important things in the book. Whether you believe that he's Jesus or whether you believe he's just a really decent human being who is articulating his commitment to make a better world, it really depends upon who you are and what your perspectives are, because beliefs really inform our perspective. But also the fact that he becomes a celebrity through the viral media is another manifestation of who we are as Americans. And that kind of is a catalyst to all of the other things that happen in the novel. For example, ultimately, what they don't know about him is that he's actually dying. He's got an incurable disease, and this is his last opportunity to make an impact on his life, on life.
Oh, wow.
And do you want me to stop?
No, go ahead. Tell us about it. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, there is controversy. The people who originally endowed the old folks' home want to take it back because they're not happy with the fact that he's doing all of these controversial things. There are people on the faculty who similarly feel that he's a fraud. But in fact, what happens is that he does die because of this disease, which nobody really knows about. And when they decide they're going to have a very serious ceremony for his funeral and celebrate his life, because what he has succeeded in doing is bringing a lot of disparate people in the community together because of the way in which he's behaving. The Catholics, the Muslims, the Jews, etc. And so that he's become a unifier for people who subscribe to that. And that's very important because they decide that they're going to have at least a decent funeral and celebrate the fact that he has been a unifier. Now, I will just digress a moment on that subject and say that we are a very divided society, as we know, and I won't pontificate on that. But the fact is we've had a period in which, starting with the Reagan era, we went from being a reasonably communally oriented to society to being a period of a group of individualists. It was a reaction to the Cold War. And what we have today is perhaps the absolute nadir of that situation, where people are so divisive and they don't have any tolerance for the other point of view. So his coming together with that unifying factor is extremely important to the community, and they decide that they really want to celebrate that. But then the next day, after the funeral home says, somebody has stolen his body.
Oh,
so
whoa.
It's very difficult for them to think about how they're going to have this. And they ultimately decide that one of the dear elderly people who died, who was a great teacher, they'll put her body in the coffin and they'll have the ceremony that way.
Oh, wow.
And so it's celebrating one decent people when another one is gone. But then they do have a celebration, and there's singing parts of the Messiah, and all of the leaders of the whole various factions in the society have come, and it is a very unifying event for the society and for the community. So then they have one further question. There are all these people, as I said, that think he's the Messiah, and other people who think he's a charlatan, and other people think he's a really decent human being. They find out that the superintendent that he represented, they thought was a functionary, was in the Soviet Union actually the janitor. And the reality was that even though he had these academic credentials, that was the only job he could get. So that creates a certain ambiguity. And then finally, when they are looking at his insurance policy, they find that Lev Kyol, was not in the insurance policy at all, that the only record they could find from him is somebody who died in the siege of Leningrad back in World War II. So there's an additional ambiguity. So the question is perspective. How do you see the world? And you see the world through your own subjective lens. Yeah. I could read other provisions from the parts of the book, but I think probably I've said enough on that, on that subject.
So now this is book 3 of a series, is that correct?
No, it is a series, and it's book 3 of the series. The first one, as I said, is Lost and Found. I can give you how Lost and Found connects to this, for example.
Yes, please do. Is Lost and Found the first in the series, or?
Lost and Found's the first in the series, yes.
Okay.
It has, much as this book does, a lot of teaching from that are significant from a religious and a universal standard. For example, in Lost and Found, the community decides that they want to get a new seating chart for the high holidays for the synagogue, because everybody comes to that kind of thing. And so they get a computer guy to do it. And how it turns out is that all of the uninformed, unpopular people, the poor people, get to have the best seats, and all of the wealthy people and the influential people who would normally get the best seats are seated in the back. So the moral there is those who are who are lost will be found, you might say, and the poor shall be blessed and lead. And so you see that specific issue as it is articulated in Lev's performance as well. For example, the dinner that I told you about is the same subject, and it comes from, in this case, Christian liturgy. So that's continuity there between the two books. Just to give you a couple of examples, the third book is the way in which I see. I'm sort of jumping ahead but the fact is, I start with the seed of an issue, the seed of an idea, and in that situation, my wife and I went to the Yucatan, and we saw the Palenque, which is an archaeological site there, and there is a bas-relief there that is called the cross. The cross is actually a cross, and so it's part of the cross temple there. So I got the idea, if that obviously it comes from Christians that came to visit in early times and had an influence on the culture of the Mayans. And then that led to a couple of books. One element was that I have Jewish Indians in the first book, Lost and Found, a Jewish Indian who had a bookstore.
Yeah.
And it happened to have some of the most arcane and valuable Jewish mystical books. And the bookstore died. The bookstore burns. And people didn't really appreciate it that much.
Oh, wow. So
what this is a metaphor, for example, on what was lost in the Holocaust.
Oh, wow.
So then this going forward to the next book, to The Seed Apple, as I said, I took the concept of the Jewish Indians, and I said to myself, maybe if this a missionary was able to go across and have an influence, there may have been Jewish King Solomon's sailors who went across the ocean, and they got into the Mayan Empire, and they had some influence because they were builders. So that's the nexus of the next book, where the people that Mendel, the narrator, encounters in Palm Springs are Jewish Indians who have created their own kind of very sophisticated area, and who are claimed to be descended from these people who came from the Mayan Empire in 800 BC and came to and were living there ever since. So that creates the essence of the third book, where it happens to be during the Cold War, in which there's a tower that they have erected that is going to be a communication tower for submarines in a doomsday scenario during the Cold War. And under this is an earlier tower, and under that is a holy site. This is part of the book too, where the Mendel befriends these people, and they take him in, and they share their library, and they give him the archive, the story that actually is ostensibly written by the original ancestor, which he has a chance to be exposed to. It's actually part of the book. But also in the book is the fact that the son of the guy who's the father figure in this family has different ideas about war and is against the idea of this tower, which has military implications. So there's a father-son conflict there. Just to give you a couple of things that are going on in the book.
Yeah, lots
so
of
anyhow,
stuff.
Then the fourth book is the Tamar, and she's the 18th. She's in the late 18th century, and she's the person who's been appointed to lead this Indian group, the Binyani, and during that time, and it's after the Civil War, and she has got to defend the community against settlers, against other the army, etc. And at the same time, she's having an affair and dealing with her husband, who's in a state of revolt against the military, etc. So that kind of gives you a sense what is in that book is a view of late 19th century California at the time of the industrial age, when telephones were becoming an event, and there was labor conflict, and the railroads were there, etc. So that kind of tells you about all four of the books in a very quick, short way.
And those are 4 of the 8 books that you've written, correct?
Yes, exactly. All with the reference to Mendel, who is the narrator of the third one, the 3 of them, and who figures as in the in part of the fourth one as well.
Now, is there more coming from the series?
No, there aren't. But the 4 that I wrote that are not related to that they're all very, very different. One of them, Pursuit of Happiness, is in the Revolution, the American Revolution. A Quaker actually is recruited by the American revolutionaries, by the Committee of Correspondence, which actually was the first CIA in the United States. And he scopes out what is ultimately the Washington's crossing the Delaware and the Christmas Eve invasion of Trenton, which when the Hessians were all drunk, and it was one of the turning points of the war. And then he's recruited to go to the Caribbean to try and find the various armaments that have been sent. This is all true. When I'm dealing with history, I'm very fastidious in the research. And he's dealing with the fact that Beaumarchais, the playwright in France, was responsible for getting a lot of arms that went to go to the revolution, and they actually were not delivered. So he goes down to find them and ultimately does locate them and brings them back through a blockade. But in the meantime, he also has an affair with a woman who's disenchanted from her life, etc. And so it includes a slave revolt. It includes the first amphibious activity of the United States Marines ever. And all of that's historic. So that is one of the books. And I could tell you about the others. They're all very different. But should I mention a couple of others?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Let's plug
All
them.
right. Sure. All right. Then one of the others is Prodigal Sons. And that one deals with a Jewish art historian. This is during World War II. And his family is deported. He tries to find them. It then takes you to the Jewish partisans who were in the Polish forests during World War II. This is all faithfully documented. He then goes on to the illegal immigration, of which occurred prior to the state of Israel. And he's there fighting in the early days of the War of Independence, also historically documented. And then after the war, he's sent back to Germany and to find and eliminate Nazis that have fallen through the cracks.
Oh, wow.
And he falls in love there with a woman who is a pianist, and she's working on the Goldberg variations, which figures through the book. And then after that, he ultimately has to decide whether he stays there with her, and or goes to Israel and makes a new life for himself. And that's again, as with the other book, it's really up to the readers to figure out what, in fact, he does. But there are two tertiary elements of that. The first is that this is a loose telling of the Wagnerian opera, the Götterdämmerung. And so the main theme there is the end of ideology. So that kind of gives you a sense of that book. And another one that I'll mention is After the Parch, which is set about 40 years from now, after the dissolution of the United States, after a heavy-duty drought and a pandemic. And that is a kind of a road story. But it has many kind of attributes which are different, but at the same time plausible. And that's where I like to live in my novels, where the realm of plausibility, push it a little bit, but not so that you think it's just science fiction.
So what motivates you want to write these books? When did you start writing and decide you were an author and decide to go for it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I sort of started when I was in high school, and I began to write, and then it really became part of my life. I couldn't really stop. It was a little bit like breathing for me. And I wrote these novels parallel to having this active life as an executive in wind energy and as a lawyer. But it was always just the other thing I did, and it was never could be separated from who I was and what my life is. I've always likened it to breathing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
There's a peculiar thing about it, which I will share with people, and they may be aware of it, particularly if they've done some writing. There comes a time in the process of writing a novel, at least for me, when the characters live. And they live in my head, and I almost can really step back passively and let them carry on with the novel. And it's a remarkable process that maybe you'd think I'm nuts, or maybe,
no, it's a lot of folks go through that.
Yeah. So in any event, that's how it happens. And I've always thought people talk about writer's block, and they talk about some powerful writers talk about, I write 2 chapters or this, and then I quit. And it's never been that way for me. It's just there, and it's always pleasurable.
That's good, because a lot of people don't find pleasure. Sometimes writing for them is pulling teeth. So it's great you have that ability. Yeah,
my attitude is if you don't like what you're doing, don't do it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So how do you approach writing a novel? How do you sit down? Do you lay out a plan, or do you kind of wing it, or just start writing stuff down and see how it shapes, or how do you approach it?
That's a good question. I've never thought that. I've thought about a lot of writers that they're like the cat on the piano keys, and they start with something and then they can't finish it because they never really worked it out. And my attitude is, as I said, you start with the kernel of an idea. One of these books which I wrote, and I'll give you an example of how that started. My wife and I were at a restaurant, Modesto Lanzoni, who had an art collection. And I looked up next to me, and there was a piece of art, and I was really intrigued by it. So I wanted to find out who it was. And so somebody said, "Oh, yeah, that's so-and-so Harold Paris." And so I had never heard of him. And then, so I got interested in his life, because it turns out he was a professor at UC Berkeley in the art department. And I also, then there was a retrospective at the Art Museum in Berkeley also of Franz Marc. And I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was first an early artist who died in World War I. And I got interested in his work, and I encountered his notebooks. They were in German. I had some of them translated, and I found out that there was a connection between the two of them that I saw. The first was that there was a sense of how God was informing all of the different antagonists in World War I. They all relied on that. And then, so this, in any event, I began to assemble a novel. based upon the lives of these two guys. And I found that what they had in common were, even though their art was quite different, was that they were both very narcissistic. And then I saw that their lives were parallel with the evolution of, this was my research, parallel to the evolution of women in their lives. And what I found was that it went from very passive to very aggressive, assertive women over the period of the 20th century. So the book ultimately evolved. There's an awful lot of sequences in the World War I in the battlefield, and then going to World War II and post-World War II and the Cold War and the time when Berkeley was invaded by Governor Reagan, so what they called People's Park. Yeah. So in any event, this all became a continuous novel, and it's with the relationship between narcissism and creativity and the empowerment of women in the 20th century. Those were the two parallel themes that were explored and approached. And I did that with kind of a novel way. I decided that it would be a retrospective, but with words, not with the stuff that's hanging on the wall. So that some of them are sketches and some of them are fully realized. And that's just an internal structure of the book that nobody would understand unless somebody told them. Anyhow, that's the way in which books evolve for me. Start with the kernel of an idea, and then it goes into a story, and then I do an awful lot of research so that whatever's going on is consistent with reality. And at the same time, I've evolved the characters, and the characters, they have certain personalities, and the characters then take over and write the book.
Oh. A lot of authors tell me that. They have their characters drive them crazy and bug them, and they basically get it done. So, yeah, very interesting. Is there any future books you have that you're working on or anything that you'll be publishing soon that we should tease out?
No, this book of essays, I've written a couple of essays that haven't been published. For example, on the subject of religion, I have a very elaborate essay which says that you need to eliminate the anthropomorphic figure for God and substitute one that is based upon the life force which you experience through all of evolution, and as well as a response to quantum physics, because of which is a continuity there. So that's something I've done. Periodically, I do essays. And the thing that I do on the Substack is short essays on various subjects.
Are they like novels, or are they essays on current events, or?
Yeah, some of them are on current events. Some of them are on, for example, I did one on evolution. One that I've just done is the evolution of language. And then most of them are related. I did one, for example, on a couple of ones on war, taking an overview of war. And normally they go every different direction. They are somewhat linear. They are also expansive. And I do research on them.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's something that I'm working on at this point. But I have an unpublished novel, and I'm sticking it out there. It's actually the only one that is relatively autobiographical and set in Israel before the 6-Day War. But I'll see if anybody wants to buy it.
Oh, we'll see how that goes. So as we go out, give people a final pitch out to pick up your books and get to know you better on your website, on your Substack, and all that good stuff, and .coms.
Okay.
So give people a final pitch out to people where they can find your Substack, .coms, and just whatever final pitch out you want to give to people as we go out.
Yeah, well, anyhow, the books are all available on Amazon in various forms, Kindle and paperback, and some of them are hard copy. And as far as Substack's concerned, I think you can find it by going to my name, Sheldon Greene, but some of them in there have an extra E on the end. Or else to see if you can find the magazine called CRIT. So that's pretty much that.
All right.
I don't know if there's anything more I should tell you about my own life. I'm an old guy and fortunate because I'm one of these long-lived characters that's trying the deterioration. So I love that every day, and every day is renewable for me. I'm a Zen approach to life where what we have now, what I have right now, the only reality is that you and me are talking about my life. So anyhow, that's about it for me.
All right. Shel, thank you very much for coming to the show. We really appreciate it.
It was absolutely my happiness to be here.
Thank you. And thanks, Jonas, for tuning in. Order up his book wherever fine books are sold, The Lev Effect, out November 2nd, 2020. Book 3 in his series, his 4-book series. So check that out as well, by Sheldon Greene. Thanks, Jonas, for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTok, and all those crazy places in the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning, consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.
All right, Shel, great job.